Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some big news here on the docket today. We've got Kevin Warren talking about a potential 16-team playoff. We've got ESPN making a major offer to the Pac-12, trying to get all of their media rights. But guys, first we are going to talk. It says the Big Ten could expand beyond the additions of USC, UCLA, says Commissioner Kevin Warren, if it adds, quote-unquote, additional value to the conference. So that's not anything we didn't already know. I don't know if I phrased that right, but we already knew this basically, and that's why the Big Ten has been extremely reluctant to add Washington and Oregon. They're really only interested in Notre Dame and Stanford at this point because they want that additional value. And if you add, really Stanford would be this facilitator to adding Notre Dame, where Notre Dame brings in a ton of value. Stanford still has the academics. They're really looking at those two teams. If they can't get Stanford, they will, number one, they have to get Notre Dame. If they get Notre Dame, they want Stanford. If they can't get Stanford, they'll take Washington. That was the rumor that we heard. So Kevin Warren, I get asked every single day, what's next? Warren said Tuesday about Big Ten football, it may include future expansion, but it will be done for the right reasons at the right time. We will not expand to just, of course, we will not expand to just expand. It will be strategical. It will be for additional value. So yeah, the Big Ten, there's no reason there's so many teams that want to get into these two super conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC. There's no point in accepting a team like Oregon if they're not going to bring you any value. You don't need to be, you're already ridiculously relevant. See, the problem the Big 12 is facing, they're going to have to add teams just to stay relevant. The Big Ten obviously is not going to have that problem with USC, Ohio State, Michigan. So the only way you're adding teams now that you're up to 16 teams, just like the SEC, the only reason you would be adding is for additional value, and that could trigger the next wave of conference realignment. The Big Ten gets Notre Dame. You can certainly expect the SEC to counter that in some way, and then we would be looking at what happens with the ACC grant of rights. Does the SEC, we've been speculating, does the SEC head west and get jealous because the Big Ten's on the West Coast in California? Does the SEC target Oregon or Washington or even both of them? So the next trigger, at least right now, it looks like, would be Notre Dame going to the Big Ten because it makes sense. It'll make the Big Ten more valuable. They would 100% do that. Warren is saying that in this quote. And then you'd also get Stanford or Washington. That would push it to 18 teams. And then we would expect a response from the SEC in that event. He also reiterated his full support for Kevin Warren, guys. Who remember? This is like the first time I know Kevin Warren, the commissioner, but we remember him back during the 2020 season, the pandemic. I have never seen somebody so bad at their job, but keep their job. Oh my God, that was such a dark time. We're just trying to move past it. We are. Remember, what did they cancel the season, and then they ended up trying to play 8 games? Yeah, Ohio State. What was Ohio State? I think Ohio State was 6-0 going into the national championship. Amazing. And then they got destroyed by Alabama because Alabama was lying, not testing, saying all their players were fine. Saban actually gave, the Bama players actually got, I'm not going to discuss this. People, I'm not going to talk about that. But this is the big story, that a new model would be reached. That's the major news here. The Big 12 was one of 3 leagues, along with the ACC and Pac-12, that voted against a 12-team proposal after months of discussions, which I don't agree with at all. I mean, I'm a fan of the Big Ten Conference. The Pac-12, I don't know why the Pac-12 would vote against it. I mean, when is the last time the Pac-12 got a team into the playoff? If you're going to 12 teams, you're making more meaningful games. The ACC, voting again. I mean, they get. It makes no sense if we want more revenue, if we want games to mean more. There is no logical reason. The only reason people give me for wanting to stay at 4 teams is, it makes the regular season matter, or they just don't want change because we're humans and we like everything to stay the same, and they're scared about change and, 12 teams, it's too many, it's going to affect the competitive balance, when in reality, when you look at other North American leagues playoffs, the MLB, the NBA, March Madness, 64 teams, they all have expanded playoffs. They all let more teams in. Exclusivity will not kill the regular season. It'll still mean a ton because you only get 12 regular season games in college football. This is not the MLB where you're playing every night. Ohio State only plays 7 or 8 home games a year. So whether you have a 12-team playoff, a 4-team playoff, an 8-team playoff, a 16-team playoff, those games are very minute. They're meaningful. They're always going to be meaningful no matter what because there's so few. It's not like we're expanding it to make it 30-game seasons. Yes, if it was a 30-game season, it would be less meaningful. But making the playoff bigger is not going to impact the games as severely as people think. Like if Ohio State somehow lost to Rutgers, that would still be a huge deal. Trust me, just because a team can lose a few times and still get into the playoff, those games, upsets would still matter. And now you get more teams getting into the playoff. Every New Year's 6 game matters. Guys, I've done this several times where I rant about why the playoff needs to be expanded. And I believe there was a quote, I don't have it here, but Kevin Warren was talking about a potential, here it is. A 16-team college football playoff has entered the chat. A look at a number of new discussions in the college football playoff format. 16 just seems to be out there. That's what Gene Smith, the Ohio State AD, said. You can't ignore it. So, yeah, I think the format they will go with will be a 12-team playoff model. But I'm not going to, be mad if they go 16. I'm perfectly fine with the 16. I would say maybe at 16. It's a little bit too many at that point. But 16 teams is way better than 4, in my opinion. The more, the better. It does get a little bit watered down. Again, the model I love, I've said this several times, it's the 12-team format. The first 4 seeds get auto buys, so it still is important to be one of those first 4 seeds. There's still an emphasis on it. And then round 1, you've got on-campus games, 5v12, 6v11, 7v10, 8v9 seeds. They face each other. Round 2, it's on-campus games, again with the first 4 seeds, all hosting games. And then round 3 would be the final 4, which would be games at the playoff sites, and then those are all neutral site, and the national championship game would be neutral site as well. A 16-team model, I don't know if they would, how they'd split it up. I guess 1v16, 2v15, 3v14, something like that. The reason I could see them going with a 16-team playoff model, it's all about money. So 16 is more than 12. There's going to be more games. You're going to make more revenue, theoretically, than you would in a 12-team model. So that way is the one way I could see them going with 16. From a, college football healthy ecosystem standpoint, I still think 12 is the most superior format. When you look at all the different models, the 8-team, the 12, or the 16, I think 12 is the best one. But this isn't a thing where, listen, if they go 16, that's unbelievable. More games that are meaningful. We want to avoid situations where these New Year's 6 games become complete jokes and you have starting quarterbacks like Kenny Pickett sitting out of a New Year's 6 game. That is despicable. And Pittsburgh finally makes the New Year's 6 game, and then that happens. It's unbelievable. That is why college football really needs to look into the mirror, and you think they would be saying, okay, this is so stupid, nobody's even going to watch. This is supposed to be one of the most meaningful games, right? A New Year's 6 game. It's supposed to be one of the biggest games of the college football season. It's a complete joke. The quarterback sits out. You have to do something. You have the obligation, if you're one of these athletic directors, to say, listen, we have to change this and make these games meaningful. So when it comes to the whole playoff discussion, 16 teams, it's out there. 12 teams is what I think they're going to go with in 2026. So 2025, the whole 4-team agreement ends, I don't know if there's a thing they can do to get it installed quicker. If, I don't know anything with the legal stuff, but I know the 2025 playoff deal ends with like the companies and how they do the whole 4 teams, the TV contracts, and then 2026, theoretically, they could instill whatever new model they wanted, whether it's 8-team, 12-team, 16 teams, whatever. So that is the situation there. And then we've got some more news regarding the Pac-12 situation. It's a complete disaster. Fascinating look at how much a few teams can command so much money. USC, UCLA were 50% of total Pac-12 worth. Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal are now 60% of the worth in the Pac-12. So yeah, that actually is an argument for unequal revenue sharing for some of these bigger schools, because they make, it's the idea that USC makes so much more than Oregon State. Why are they getting the same amount in terms of TV revenue? So it's definitely really interesting, and it's part of the reason why Oregon and Washington have really hurt their relationships with other Pac-12 teams, because apparently they're completely out of control. They really think they have leverage now with USC and UCLA out of the Pac-12. They're demanding things, and other Pac-12 schools got really upset. And then we've got this breaking story that just broke today. It looks like we have a new ESPN offer for the Pac-12. It's $320 million per year for 12 years, all 3 tiers. So they would have full media rights. The grant of rights required or will come with a clause for reductions, assigning each school a percentage of their worth to the overall contract, whatever that means. Yeah, that's some legal crap. Previous offer was $24 million for 6 years. Yeah, so they're lowballing them. No, they're not lowballing them. You can see the next tweet. This new deal is said to be $2 million per school, more than what the Pac-12 was likely to get going to market, and separating all 3 tiers amongst ESPN and other companies. So they're actually offering more, and ESPN really wants live action with that late window. So the late window, the 10:30 window on the East Coast, they want action. And this is a pennies on the dollar thing. I mean, is this $25 million per year per school? It's going to be less. I mean, obviously way less. I think the Big Ten is projected to make $125 million in 2029. So basically, Big Ten schools are going to be making $100 million more than whatever the Pac-12 could look like in 2029, if it's even still around. So it is just so bad. There's no way Oregon and Washington can like these figures. The Big 12, I think, is looking at around 34 or 35 million per year per school. A lot of that depends on if the Big 12 adds teams, because right now they're talking to Stanford, they're talking to Colorado, and as well as Arizona, and maybe even California. So they're talking to several teams, but they're looking at like 34 million. And then the SEC is a little bit lower than the Big Ten, but they're still over 100 million when they get their new deal. So things are just looking really bleak for the Pac-12. I know you can understand why, and honestly, it would be good for college football if ESPN just got their full rights. The last thing we need is the Pac-12 agreeing to a deal with one of these streaming companies like Apple TV. I don't think, normally the streaming companies like to leech on to bigger events, so I don't think Apple TV or Amazon or whatever would go for something like the Pac-12. They're much more likely to try and buy into like a Big Ten agreement to where they get like tier 3, like maybe one Big Ten game where they can host it, something like that. I think the streaming stuff is so bad for college football, for NFL. Streaming games is, and I know a lot of people have streaming stuff. Streaming games is a horrible experience to watching live sports. It is a horrible experience. And you take a look at what the NFL is doing. It's a complete disaster, guys. I don't know if you know, Thursday night games are going to be on Amazon Prime. You're not going to be able to go to bars, watch them, because they're not going to have them on the TVs. And obviously with streaming, you get the buffering, you get the lag. You're basically dealing with a 2 or 3 minute delay. It is a disaster, and I hope streaming services literally go bankrupt. I know some people that's like, it's cheaper. Well, the reason it's cheaper than cable is because it's worse. It lags. It's not connected to anything. And when I watch, a game on ESPN or whatever on my TV, I don't have to deal with any sort of lag. As opposed to the streaming services, it's just constant. There's issues. Then it goes down to resolution. It drops to 720 from 1080. It is just horrible. It is a horrible experience. And when it comes like the streaming services in general, they make no sense. You can't change the channel. That's the whole idea of having a TV. Just flip the channel. You can't do it. It is an impractical way. And the people say it's cheaper. Yes, it's cheaper because it sucks. Like, let's just be honest. It's cheaper because it's a worse product than cable. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of the situation. I know a lot of young kids, they love it, but it is significantly worse, and hopefully streaming and things like Amazon Prime end up bankrupt. That would be an amazing turn for all of us. But guys, the big stuff we've got the situation with the playoff. It's expanding. Kevin Warren comes out. He says, we're sure it's expanding. He might, Gene Smith is saying maybe a 16-team playoff. I think it's going to be 12. And then we've got ESPN trying to buy up of all the tiers to get all the media rights for the Pac-12 over the next 12 years. Kind of low. It wasn't a low ball, but it's an extremely small amount compared to what other conferences are going to make, which is going to really anger Washington and Oregon specifically. Also, I'm sure some of the other schools as well. So we'll see what happens there. There's many possibilities. We're looking right now at the Pac-12 possibly dissolving, depending on what happens with multiple schools possibly going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. There's been 4 or 5 rumored schools. We'll see what happens in early August. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.